well in this country. Communities right across our nation are mourning the loss of those who died on the Ukrainian flight. Many are offering comfort and an emphatic shoulder to cry on. But the victims' families and friends are still faced with a very challenging road ahead as they go through the grieving process, trying to make sense of what has happened. Now, even with Iran admitting it shot down the plane, grieving for the victims may not be any easier. And for a closer look on how to cope with that grief, we've invited to the program today Tabasom Eblaghie onto the program. Tabasom is a clinical counselor who specializes in grief and loss, and she joins us right now from Coquitlam in British Columbia. So Tabasom, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
You know, I want to begin with the news that we're dealing with today, that Iran admits, after denying it, that one of its missiles brought down Flight 752. Does that fact, that admission, does that provide answers for people who are grieving, or does that just add another layer to the emotions that they're feeling right now?
You know, honestly, we're all trying to make sense of something that was senseless, but having answers and somebody assuming responsibility for this is one of the initial steps towards starting the healing process. At least this provides some answers to the why, when, how. Of course, there'll be many more questions, but it is the initial step for us to move towards healing.
So one step towards moving towards healing, as you say. But you know, as we talk about the grief, that certainly is one experience. But this whole affair, that must also have a traumatic effect for families of those that are now mourning people who have died. How could that trauma manifest itself, do you think?
You know, a tragedy like this, where it was so unexpected and under very rare circumstances, it leaves you feeling shocked, unprepared, unable to comprehend what has just happened. And so you may end up in a state of utter confusion and disbelief. A lot of people will say they are unable to make decisions. There may be ruminations, flashbacks, perhaps the images that they've seen on TV. It becomes part of their memories, nightmares. And so these are the natural reactions that the brain will have, that you will have emotionally over the next weeks, months, and years as you're trying to grapple with the new identity that you have to construct as somebody who was, as somebody who has a loved member who died in this manner. And the initial shock, you know, how you heard the news. How did these families hear the news? Did the family hear it on TV? Did they see it on social media? Did they have a family member call them? This initial shock, really, it starts the process of grieving, and it leaves you feeling unable to process the news of what you've just heard.
Unable to process it. You know, there's another layer to this, and this has to be the fact that many people who died actually came to Canada pursuing dreams, building their dreams in this country in the course of this accident. How does that aspect of this tragedy affect survivors?
You know, a lot of us, we've come here, and so we need to give grief a voice. You would want the families to speak about these lost hopes, lost dreams, and opportunities, and perhaps the sacrifices that these families went through to provide better opportunity for themselves, for their children, and for Canada as a community. And so they will want to speak about the lost hopes and dreams, but you also want to make space for them to speak about the achievements of their loved ones. What is it that the sacrifices, what did they gain through these sacrifices, and what is the legacy that these individuals have left behind? This can also assist us as we're grieving for these loved ones.
You know, we're quickly losing time here, but before you go, I do want to ask almost a helpful tip for you, because for people who know them, for all Canadians really, what can people do to offer support to those affected by this?
You know, we have this, as Persians, our culture is really built on generosity and not burdening others. We always want to be the ones to help. So we have this thing called Persian Tarot, where you almost have to ask a person a number of times before they will accept help. So perhaps if you want to help somebody, is do things for them without asking. cook for them, do the shopping for them, be there without judging or imposing your own beliefs on them. Just don't set a time limit on how much time grief should take. Be there to support them and listen to them. And also support the children. Don't forget the children in all of this. Be there to assist them and be there as a listening support for them, for the families and their children.
Well, it's been interesting to see these vigils right across the country, and many of them have been held at university campuses because many of those who died were students or academics. How helpful do you think it has been for survivors to see Canadians from all backgrounds, not just Persian or Iranian, but from all backgrounds come together to express their sorrow and their sadness at the loss?
When grief comes into our lives, it can isolate us. And so when we see something like this, where it's communal grieving, where Canada and Canadians are standing behind every single individual who has suffered this loss, this communal grief has been crucial, again, to bringing the community together and giving us opportunities to share prayers, realize that there's no us and them, that we're all truly one human family, and that this tragedy has been a national tragedy, but also one where it's given us opportunity to come together and unite further after following something so traumatic.
Tabasom, a very important conversation to have given what has happened these last few days, so I appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's Tabasom Eblaghie, a clinical counselor who specializes in grief and loss, who joins us in Coquitlam, BC.